Welcome to the Darcy Wellness Show. My name is Jeff Darcy. I'm an acupuncturist and herbalist at the Darcy Wellness Clinic. And joining me today in the studio is Dr. Margot Roman, who is practicing at the MASH Animal Clinic in Hopkinton. So welcome, Margot. Today we're going to be talking about nutrition, animal nutrition. And if you don't get that nutrition, all the terrible things that can happen and the suffering that can happen as a result. So what would you like to kick off and say about nutrition? I know it's one of your favorite subjects.
Yeah. Well, nutrition is the key. Nutrition is the core of how you keep the immune system strong. So by getting good quality food, getting the body to absorb that food, the body can actually function much more efficiently and also try to heal.
Great. If we could move into our first slide. So it's so key, and yet so many animals are not getting it. Here's a few quotes. Nutritional deficiencies or imbalances, or as well as exposure to various chemical drugs and toxin, present a continual immunological challenge which can suppress the immune system. Wholesome nutrition is the key to maintaining a healthy immune system and resistance to disease. The requirement for essential nutrients increases during periods of rapid growth or reproduction, and also may increase in geriatric individuals because immune function and the bioavailability of these nutrients generally wanes. So I'm sure there's nothing in that you would disagree with.
No, that says it all.
In a nutshell, yeah.
You know, the immune system relies on the food that feeds it.
Yeah.
And if you don't get the food that feeds it, there's no way that the immune system can keeping itself at a high level to protect itself. So it's so important, and it's true, as you age, that your organ systems don't work as efficiently. So if you're feeding less quality food as you get older, you're not even absorbing the minimum that you need to stay healthy. So it's a system that has to be in balance and get the proper pieces to make it function well.
Right. And we know that in humans, for instance, if we go to our next slide, that nutrition is so key. It's just ridiculous, you know, that 91% of diabetes can be prevented, that you have 80% of heart disease that could be prevented. There we are, 70% of stroke and 71% of all cancers are preventable. I mean, that's just astonishing. We were talking earlier that, you know, probably Medicaid and Medicare is going to be bankrupted by the increase in the cost of treatment of diabetes, because diabetes is so rapidly increasing over the last 2 decades. So it's true in the animal realm too, right? The idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't have that high of a diabetes issue as we do in the human population, but you see animals, when they're 10 years old, they look really old. You know, when the average age of dogs and cats was much, much higher years ago. I had cats that were 20 and 25 often, and now it's like a real rarity.
Yeah.
And the oldest dog I ever saw was 21, and that dog, that was in 1977, the dog was 21, and I have not seen a dog live to 21 since then.
Wow.
So I know that I saw dogs that were much older many years ago, and they just aren't living as long.
Yeah.
And we think, oh, well, we've got all these fancy surgeries and we've got all these fancy diagnostics, but if the immune system is not working because the nutrition's not there, and all the over-vaccinations and all the things that traumatize the immune system, then how do we expect these animals to live to that age?
Right.
And they don't. They don't live to that age.
So generally, the idea of you know, I was reading about dog foods originally started in the late 19th century in London, where they started to make treats into kind of biscuits that you could, just for convenience, and that then spiraled and went crazy through the 1930s. So some people say you should just give the same food, you know, out of a bag, processed food, you know, dry processed food, to a cat or a dog for the rest of his life, and don't even change brands.
Well, that's because it's sold by that company. And they want you to buy that dog food, and they want you to buy that cat food. But really, they need to have variation. They need to have fresh food. But
it's kind of an obscene to say that you should eat one tiny little processed pellet for the rest of any animal's
you know what?
life.
I think that they should have all different kinds of chows for.
Yeah.
They should have a chow for children, you know, baby chow. They should have a teenage chow. They should have couch potato chow.
Yeah.
They should have, you know, teenage pregnancy chow. I mean, they should have all these different chows for our children. Then we wouldn't have to worry about what we feed them, and they just put it in a bowl, and that was what you gave them, and that's the way it functions.
Yeah.
But it's not. It isn't that simple. And having live food, you can't make a chow that's been heated to 500 degrees, that has a 2-year shelf life on it, that is heavily processed with preservatives and flavor enhancers, be something that the animal can retrieve all that information into their gut and through their body. It's just not happening.
Right. So if we could go to our next slide, even the idea of, you know, processed versus unprocessed, or organic versus inorganic. So the idea that whole food, that refined food, for instance, brown rice versus white rice, there's a 26 to 83% loss in nutrition. Corn to corn starch is a 31 to 100% loss. Sugar to white sugar is 83 to 100% loss. Milk to fat-free milk is 80 to 100%. So when we start to refine these foods, process these foods, then the actual nutrients that we end up with is greatly reduced.
It's gone.
Yeah.
And then they put it back in and they say it's enhanced. It's like they killed everything going in and then they put it back in. I mean, one of the whole thing with taurine in cats, I mean, back in when I did my internship at Angel, we saw a lot of cardiomyopathy by both hypertrophic and dilative. And they really figured out at that point that it was due to a taurine deficiency in the food. When you heat process meat, you destroy the taurine. So all the heat processing that they did for canned food and dry food destroyed this taurine, which was an essential amino acid for cardiac development and strength, and that was all destroyed, you know, with heat processing. So when you feed raw food and raw meat, that taurine's already in there because that's in the muscle meat and it's in there. But interestingly, you know, when you look at evolution, the highest amount of taurine found in an animal species is in mice. And so that mice, which is the natural food for a cat, and they don't cook it and process it and barbecue it, they eat it raw. So their immune system and their whole function was related to getting that amino acid.
The ingredients in some of these commercial foods, certainly, you know, in the past, were pretty horrific. The idea of rendered protein being roadkill or diseased animals that are cooked to extremely, you know, high temperature, you know, sometimes 1,000 degrees, and then to have an end product that's called rendered protein and put that as a protein source in food. I mean, that's pretty nasty. That's obscene. It is
obscene. And what happens is animals that have cancer or are downer cows or have really bad medical issues that you would not want to have anybody feed that to an animal.
Yeah.
Those animals are rendered down with their cancer, with all the rest of their organ systems, with chemicals that they pour on them. And
phenobarbital from being euthanized.
All this stuff is all rendered down, cooked up, and made into a slosh that is put onto to process grains that have everything removed from them, but are the byproduct of the human food production. And so when people, you know, when I have my clients feed raw food and fresh foods and organic foods and they make their own meals or they buy from very reputable companies, you know, they're trying to do a better job than eating some of these highly processed foods that spend millions and millions of dollars on advertising. So when you watch a commercial and you see that happy dog and that bag is gleaming with vegetables and fruits and everything on it, and you read the ingredient, you're going, well, where are they? You know, I mean, there's a little bit there. And it's disheartening because you know that that's not really what's in there.
So, you know, here's some commercial pet food ingredients. Meat meal, rendered product from mammal tissue. Poultry byproducts meal, ground and rendered poultry. Poultry byproducts, head, feet, viscera, and fecal contents. Hydrolyzed poultry feathers. Fish meal. Hydrolyzed hair from cattle, pigs, horses, spray-dried animal blood, dehydrated food waste, dehydrated garbage, dehydrated paunch products, rumen from slaughtered cattle, dried poultry waste, dried swine waste, undried processed animal waste. Where's the fruit and vegetable? Where's the antioxidants?
I guess if the animals that, you know, were free range that were killed and were eating wild you know, herbs out in the wild,
Yep.
and they get hit by cars, and then they get processed. Maybe that's where it is, you know. But usually they're coming from poultry farms, which
Right.
they're fed processed food, and all the animals that are being prepared for this all eat processed food. So the food chain is just deteriorated.
Yeah.
There's
yeah.
there's no value there, and they're
And with
all,
that,
you
the
know,
life force and the immune system of the
Exactly.
animals we feed it to.
exactly, and the immune system has to have a life force to it.
Yeah.
Because it it needs that to help it stay healthy.
Right. And so, in fairness to, you know, the pet food industry, there are good companies out there that are
yeah.
taking the high road, that are really, you know, trying to do a much better job and very sincere. You know, what I just quoted probably are the lower end companies, but even in the high end companies. So it is very difficult to cook your own food for your pet every single night. So, you know, and even with, you know, our own dog, it was always a mix, you know, just out of, you know, convenience, lack of time, whatever. It was always a mix between a high quality pet food, dry pet food mixed with our own food, our own prepared foods. So where is that balance between, you know, maybe you could explain the spectrum.
Yeah.
On one spectrum you have the raw, and then you have, you know, almost the scraps, and then you have processed food. What do you recommend?
Well, I mean, there are really wonderful companies out there now, and
Yeah.
they've done they've looked at
Can
what
you
the
think of a couple?
consumers need. Well, there's the company called Answers,
Honest Kitchen, you said
The
this
Honest
morning.
Kitchen, Dr. Harvey's,
Pet Birds
Bravo,
Nutrition.
Omar's Pride. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of them
Yeah.
now that are coming out with foods that people are prepared for them, and they just have to either thaw them or add water or
Yeah.
dehydrate them. And so they're really high quality foods that are out there, and some of the specialty pet stores carry, in this area, especially for pets, carries a lot of those foods
Yeah.
in Pet World, and they carry a lot of those brands, and so you can get them and you can use them interspersing to what you feed your family. So if you're eating a healthy meal, and as long as it doesn't have some of the foods that we think might be negative to animals, like onions or macadamia nuts, chocolate, raisins, grapes are some of the ones that they've sort of pulled away from the dog food. But if they don't have that stuff in it, if you're having a fresh salad and you're having a piece of fish or you're having a piece of chicken, give them the vegetables that you have that you're
Right.
eating.
I mean,
Give them all
most
that
people are
stuff.
amazed that dogs will eat raw carrots as a treat.
Right, and then pureeing the vegetables is even better because then you
yeah.
break down the cell wall and
Right.
they can totally absorb it. But it's getting
So
them.
the dirty secret about giving dogs vegetables off your plate is the gas.
Right.
Right. It's tough for the fiber for them to process
Yeah,
the
but
fiber.
they get gas on,
you can
on
get
commercial
that,
food too.
but you
I
can
mean,
also, you know, break that down like you were saying, or give, you know, products like the Power Greens, the idea of a concentrated food that you add in with the fiber removed. So
that's
there are
true.
ways
I mean, like
around
with
that.
the greens that you have, I usually, like my dogs eat, you know, raw chicken necks and
Yeah.
turkey necks, and I'll basically just sort of powder them up with the greens, and they get the greens down, and they don't even know they're getting the greens.
Right. So the spectrum of the food. So I guess on the more dedicated would be the raw food. Could you tell us a little bit about
Yeah, I mean,
the
raw,
barf,
when you-
affectionately known the
But
barf?
yeah, barf is the bones and raw food, and that was like the first one.
Yeah.
Ian Billinghurst is the one who recreated the raw diet, and you know, when people think about it, when was the last time you saw your dog or any wild animal go and cook its food? They don't.
Yeah.
They kill an animal. The first thing they eat is the intestines, and then they work their way through the rest
So
of the
they're
animal.
eating there the
The
partially
herbs,
digested
exactly.
herbs of a herbivore probably that they might have
Exactly.
hunted down and killed.
Yeah, so if they ate a rabbit, they would. The rabbit's been eating all those plants and those herbs, and then
They're pre-digested too.
Totally, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's pre-digested. It's in a very fresh form because
Yeah.
it's that GI tract's only probably had it for 10 hours
Yeah.
before it goes out the other direction. So they're getting it pretty right off the plant, and so they're eating that, and then they go and they start eating all the rest of the animal. So when you do have a fresh food diet or raw food diet, you use all these meats and vegetables, and you can get companies that have them all made up into patties or made up in little cubes or
Yeah.
tubs, and you can do it yourself, or you can buy the components and make something that is balanced. And that's the thing, is you want to try to balance it. And there's so many books now that are out there on raw diets, and you can even get stuff on the internet on raw diets that that talk about keeping enough nutrients so it's all completely balanced. And
so the idea that originally, thousands of years ago, these are carnivores. They were wolves, and then as the evolution progressed, 20,000 years ago, maybe 10,000 years ago, start to become more domesticated.
Yeah, but they never got. I doubt if a caveman cooked. Yeah, I doubt if
cavemen were
Victorian people cooked their dogs' food.
Yeah.
Most of these animals, they would get scraps off the table. It was just whatever you were eating. You just scraped off the bowl, and you took the eggs from the farm, or you took the scraps of this, and they were just given a bowl of food, and that was what they ate. And they scrounged around themselves catching vermin, because that's what they wanted them there for. So they would eat wild rabbits or rats or something like that, that were mice and stuff that were in the farm. So that's where, so that when people say, well, dogs evolutionarily have changed and they can't eat raw food, evolution takes a long time.
It's a blink of the eye.
It is.
It's 5,000
you're talking
years.
about 100 years of maybe feeding dog food, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So the quality of if we could go to our next slide, the quality is so important too about the food, because we already said about how the chemicals can really suppress the immune system. And here we have studies show that organic vegetables grown in organic soil may have more vitamins, trace elements than conventionally grown food. And of course, they're not treated with any noxious chemicals. And many fruits and vegetables, especially during the winter, are grown outside of the US, where many herbicides and pesticides not considered safe by the FDA are banned, are in use and banned in the US. So Costa Rica, Chile, and then if we move on to our next slide, these are some of the studies within humans correlating cancer with vegetable intake, and you can see here at the beginning, 100 grams a day of vegetable intake, very high amounts of lung cancer. These are about 8 different studies. But when you come towards 5-6 portions a day, it goes down to 0 in most of those studies. So the idea of getting antioxidants from vegetable intake that are protective against free radicals that lead into cancer. And here's our site on the antioxidants are the good guys, the free radicals are the bad guys. They're able to donate electrons or hydrogen ions without having to replace vitamin C and E, great sources, and then phytochemicals, phytonutrients, basically plant-based antioxidants that help to neutralize the bad guys. So taking away the environment that cancer can thrive in, that many nutritional, also I think just sailing below the radar in most animals and most humans are nutritional deficiencies that really we don't have the technology to be measured, that maybe lead to diseases in 3 or 4 years' time.
Yeah, so, keeping the animals' nutritional level higher, where they can absorb the components of the fruits and the vegetables and the phytonutrients that they're going to get from them, it's got to be so much healthier than feeding them something that's been so traumatized by cooking and processing and preservatives. And so we really want to keep the body vital, and that's that's the piece of it.
So if we could go to our next slide now actually shows that obesity is a growing problem, just the same as it is. I'm sure that we're just humanizing these pets too. If we, if a third of our society is obese now, and 66% overweight, then it's probably true of our dogs. Have you seen an increase in your practice over 30 years?
My clients, I do have some that are overweight, but once they start the raw diet, and they switch them from getting them off carbohydrates and getting them on a raw meat and fresh vegetable diet, a lot of them lean down. They happen to love the food so much better, so sometimes they want to eat more, but they're so much more satiated when they do eat. They feel like they've eaten something versus giving them some dry kibble and putting that down. So it's a healthier piece for them.
So the good news is the raw diet, if we move through. So raw diet, but also you could say mixing up food scraps, at least having consciousness, not just sentencing them to one commercial food for the rest of their lives. So the idea of mixing it in. Yeah,
what happens is a lot of vets will say, well, if you change the diet, you're going to get diarrhea. Well, to me, that means that the immune system's not strong enough, that you have to walk on a tightrope with your dog so it doesn't get diarrhea.
Yeah.
Dogs eat crap. I mean, they eat everything. They eat stuff on the ground. They eat, you know, other dogs' stools. They eat cat stools. They eat. That's normal. That's not abnormal. So if they have to eat a piece of chicken and it gives them diarrhea, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
You know, if they can't eat,
they can't get away with that.
They can't eat something that's not their dog food, then you've got a medical problem with this dog that doesn't need to be drugged. It needs to be, the intestinal tract needs to be enhanced.
It needs to be nurtured.
So that it's like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
You know, if this onslaught of bacteria comes on, I'm ready
Bring on
for
all the dirty, nasty
on,
stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
Should be able to eat and get away with it.
That's right. I mean, you know, they groom themselves in the most unusual places.
They must have something very protective in their saliva.
That's right.
We should bottle that. That would probably be good. We could go on to our next one. So the idea then of, actually this one here is good, is that these foods, sulforaphane from broccoli, you know, carotenoids, beta-carotene, lycopene from tomatoes, alanine from garlic, all of these have amazing antioxidants that help to fight disease. And if we move along on to our next one, the idea of why good nutrition, because good quality commercial pet food, you know, that it's the supplement, you need some sort of supplementation with that. So the idea of supplementing like the power greens or broccoli sprout powder are ways of getting that. And what we would suggest is, you know, make sure that these sources of dietary supplements like the power greens are organically grown, that not been irradiated, that they don't have any mixing agents in them, that they're always from whole sources. If they're going to be used herbs, that they should be, if they're Chinese herbs, should be 5-to-1 extracts because of the contamination within Chinese herbs. Our own philosophy is 100% vegetarian, so that they don't include animal capsules or, like in Chinese herbs, we'll use all kinds of objectionable animal substances like tiger bone or deer antler. And if we move on to our next one, so maybe we could talk a little bit about the role, you know, certainly in the human realm, in chronic ongoing inflammation leading towards cancer, pulmonary diseases, neurological diseases, autoimmune, so on and so forth there. It's a very key process to keep inflammation in check. Mm-hmm. And is that one of the key areas that good nutrition really steps into? Yeah,
I mean, I think we're all inflamed more than we ever were.
Right.
When you look at what causes inflammation, it's an increase of carbon dioxide in the tissue is one of the big sources. And if the body is alkalinized, it helps reduce that. There's a lot of stuff that we can eat and do to keep
the refined foods, processed foods
and stuff that increase our acidity in our body, and then we also increase, because of the environment that we live in, there's less oxygen in the environment. The CO2 levels have gone up, and those of you that watched Inconvenient Truth, you saw the level of CO2 that's in our environment now and where it will be in 10 years, and that was done 3 years ago. So now we've got 7 years left to get to the point where it's not healthy. And so as CO2 levels rise in our bodies, we're more prone to inflammation in our body. So these
processed foods are
not helping it. They're not, you know, they're not
response.
doing and you know, one of the things that I think with people too is drinking soda, because soda is carbon dioxide in under pressure, so you're making your body get higher in carbon dioxide than it needs to be. So I do a lot of ozone therapy, which I do the reverse. So I give ozone in the saline or in the fluids and try to bring the oxygen tension up, similar to a hyperbaric chamber, and try to get the body to be more oxidized. And
so a way of doing that nutritionally would be the phytonutrients that are in plant-based foods too, not just, you know, a very restricted diet towards meat or bones.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like to give my animals a lot of vegetable matter. So you know, and also the piece of it is that when you do more vegetable matter in your dog food, you're killing less animals to feed your animal.
Yeah.
And it's a very hard thing to, as a veterinarian, to say, okay, I'm spending my whole life trying to save animals' lives, and then I'm going ahead and having all these other animals get killed so I can save my animal's life.
Right.
So there's this, torn, double kind of
respect for life.
Respect for life, and having as much as you can get sustainable and cared for in a way that is not traumatizing to that animal. And no animal wants to get killed. So the fact that we kill them to take care of our animals, we have to be very respectful of that.
Yeah. If we could move on to the next slide. And, so this is about the cancer process, normal cells to abnormal to, repair or failed repair onto metastasis. And if we go quickly to the next slide again, and actually we're there, the idea of how fruits and vegetables prevent cancer. It's been found that they interrupt those cycles at every stage, just not at one stage or the other. The idea that these phytonutrients, these good chemicals, the antioxidants from fruits and vegetables will interrupt the cancer process at every stage. So that's the idea of prevention. And move on to our next one. So one of the ways of doing that are with greens. The idea that, concentrated greens from land and sea, that they're very high in chlorophyll and many other phytonutrients that can really help to supplement a diet. If you're too busy to cook individually for your animal, then just adding in some concentrated green powder on a daily basis is a way of providing 2.5 portions of fruits or antioxidant equivalent of 2.5 portions of fruits and vegetables a day mixed in. And so the idea of supplementing with greens or with broccoli sprouts. So the interesting thing about broccoli sprout powder is that not just the floret of broccoli, but the actual 7 to 10 day old broccoli sprout is that they're extremely high in sulforaphane. And there's a lot of research out of Johns Hopkins on Antituber, on increasing phase 2 liver enzymes to break down any internal toxins such as cancer cells. So a lot of great research going out on that. And also medicinal mushrooms is something to consider as well. We spoke earlier about the idea of shiitake, maitake, and reishi being used on a regular basis because it will nourish the immune system very gently over time without revving it, and also provide a whole source of other nutrients. And then to our next one, the idea of Maca Berry, which is the next slide, is a berry from southern Chile that we can see there on the top of that chart that it actually is so high in antioxidants, it's off the charts. The idea that, for instance, raspberry being 21 and orac being 945, the concentrated power, that shows that it's absolutely chock-a-block filled with anthocyanins, proanthocyanins, delphinidins, much more than any other food source. So a very small concentrated form of the Maca Berry introduced into the pet food or into dietary supplementation can, as we see here, according to the recent research, we're talking research last year, support healthy blood sugar levels, major anti-inflammatory, it boosts the immune system, neutralizes enzymes that destroy connective tissue, it increases cardiovascular functioning, and may improve eyesight. So that's a phenomenal addition to any ongoing diet. So there are ways of, even if you can't spend the time feeding your dog every single day the best thing possible, there are ways that you can supplement and help the animal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I have not used the Maca yet on the animals, and it's something that I really think is going to be an option to put into the food, or to have something that you can add into the making your dog food, or because it does have such great qualities. I mean, it's amazing.
So the takeaway is that to really look into a much more healthy diet for your animal will keep them healthy, will keep their immune system healthy, and that even if you have to use processed food, there are ways of supplementing either the greens, the mushrooms, the broccoli sprouts, or the Maca that you could supplement with it to offset some of the negative of that food, and it helps your immune system, helps your animal's immune system stay healthy longer.
And that's the whole piece, is how do we keep these animals that are beloved by us healthy and part of our family for as many years as we can and not have them suffer with chronic disease.
Margot Roman, veterinarian extraordinary at MASH Animal Clinic in Hopkinton, Mass. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on the Darcy.
Talk to you about this.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Thank you very much. And for myself, Jeff Darcy, acupuncturist and herbalist at the Darcy Wellness Clinic, I want to thank you very much for watching our show.